Amidst the glamorous royal family, if one had to look for the most perfect embodiment, inheriting the legacy of the late Princess Diana, which name would come to your mind? Not the stunning Princess Catherine, nor the two British princes, but rather the little Princess Charlotte. Charlotte, the bright and proud jewel of the Wales family, who always appears before the public with a confident, radiant look and incredible bravery for her age. However, what terrible thing happened, causing such a strong and resilient little girl to be left all alone, trembling and looking down, crying secretly in a dark, cold corridor corner of Windsor Castle? The bitter answer does not lie in the surrounding pressure from the media, but it comes from the very viciousness of the woman who held the most powerful title in the inner court at that time, Queen Camilla. Under a dignified disguise, she had sown harsh deterrents that seemed harmless, along with systematic cold, disdainful looks aimed at trampling the spirit of a child. The narrow-minded viciousness of Camilla aimed directly at Charlotte had accidentally awakened a terrifying force that she should never have foolishly touched. That was not at all the measured resistance of Princess Catherine, but the cold, ruthless wrath with the absolute overwhelming power of a future king. Prince William immediately cast aside the calm mask, personally tearing apart the toxic and fake facade of family harmony. He was ready to deliver fierce, uncompromising punishments to protect his daughter from the manipulation of that scheming woman. If you were in the position of Prince William, would you choose to protect your daughter despite having to break all royal dignity? Please comment number 1. Or would you continue to endure, biting your tongue to maintain that fake family harmony, as King Charles once did? Please comment number 2. To understand why a prince who always highly values moderation and principles would go to this extent, we must go back to the quiet but haunting moment at the Windsor Castle corridor. The atmosphere at Windsor Castle on that private family party night did not carry its usual magnificent, cozy, and glorious vibe. Instead, covering every corner of the ancient castle was a suffocating, incredibly oppressive feeling. Beneath the sparkling crystal chandeliers and luxurious silk velvet, a cruel, hidden war was silently taking place. At the place that should have been the safe haven of the royal family, the long shadows cast on the stone walls accidentally witnessed a deeply pitiful and haunting scene. Away from the fake laughter, the hugs filled with calculation, and the clinking of expensive champagne glasses, in a dark, cold corridor corner, there was a tiny figure shrinking and withdrawing into herself. That was little Princess Charlotte. The radiant, precious jewel of the Wales family, the little girl who always confidently waves to the public with a bright smile and mature demeanor, was now standing all alone. Her tiny shoulders trembled, her tear-filled eyes full of fear, looking down at the stone floor, not daring to look up at anyone. Charlotte seemed to be using all her strength just to shrink as small as possible, longing to completely disappear from this toxic and cruel space. When looking back at the modern history of the British monarchy, a shocking and heartbreaking truth is clearly exposed. Over the past 400 years, the children born under the throne have always been the subjects who had to endure the most rigorous forging. From rigid etiquette rules, dozens of suffocating norms, to the massive pressure of having to grow up before their time, a royal childhood has never been a rosy picture. However, no matter how severe the punishments the previous generations had to face, there has never been any record of a psychological suppression so vicious, despicable, and sophisticatedly disgusting as what is happening in this very era. In just a few short hours of the party, a ruthless force had stripped away the smile, suffocated the dynamism, and stolen the voice of a 9-year-old child. The one spreading that terrifying psychological venom was none other than Queen Camilla, a scheming, calculating woman, someone who always lurks to impose her authority with the dirtiest and most despicable tricks. The unusual absence of his daughter urged Prince William to quietly leave the banquet room, escaping the suffocating atmosphere, leaving behind the forced smiles and deceitful eyes of the cruel stepmother. And then, the heart of the Prince of Wales felt as if it was being slashed by thousands of knives when he stepped into the empty corridor. The image of Charlotte looking down, her lonely and hurt figure imprinted on the cold stone floor, caused his breath to catch. Putting aside all the majestic, imposing demeanor of a future king, William rushed over, kneeling on one knee on the cold floor so his eyes were level with his daughter. With a warm voice trembling from holding back extreme sorrow, he asked with full authority but overflowing with love, "Charlotte, what happened to you? Answer me, my jewel, who made you cry?" At first, the little girl only knew how to sob, the panic and fear still clearly imprinted in her innocent eyes, blinking continuously. But before the firm, safe, and immensely caring embrace of her father, the weak defensive wall of Charlotte completely shattered. With a broken, choked voice, she confessed the harsh words that her step-grandmother had hissed through her teeth at her in a hidden corner of the party. Camilla, with a disdainful, cruel attitude and eyes sharp as knives, had scolded an innocent child as a show-off and issued a threatening warning that the little girl was not allowed to speak when she was present. Those words reeking of jealousy, bitterness, and cruelty were uttered from the mouth of a person bearing the title of queen, aimed directly at a little girl simply because she carried an innate aura and a brilliant glow that Camilla could spend her whole life hoarding and calculating but could never touch. The moment those gut-wrenching confessions reached the ears of William, a terrifying shock swept through his mind. The shock did not only come from the extreme indignation of seeing his daughter blatantly mentally abused, but it also awakened a deep pain, a cruel truth. The wheel of history was ruthlessly repeating itself. The royal institution, under the manipulation and expansion of vicious usurpers like Camilla, was once again using old, cruel methods to trample, hurt, and control the new generation. The ghosts of the past, the resentful tears that the late Princess Diana once had to endure under the psychological whipping of that same bitter woman, were now coming back to life, aimed directly at his innocent little daughter. However, the current William was no longer the helpless boy, gnawing on the tragic sorrow of decades ago. The wrath inside him flared up fiercely. That was not a loud, out-of-control, or short-sighted outburst, but a cold, quiet rage, carrying absolute destructive power. He was smart enough to understand that dealing with a seasoned, venomous snake like Camilla could not be done by beating the grass to scare the snake right at her lair amidst hundreds of prying eyes. Holding Charlotte Symes, pressing the tear-soaked face of his daughter against his chest, William swallowed back the tornado of rage roaring deep inside his chest. His eyes darkened, flashing a cold, sharp look of a father ready to crush any force that dared to touch his family. That night, decisively leaving the polluted and rotten atmosphere of Windsor Castle, William took his daughter back to the peace of Adelaide Cottage. Here, in the warm light of a true home, where there were no lies and deceit, he sat down with Princess Catherine. The resilient, brave woman and his most solid anchor did not shed a single weak tear upon hearing the story. Instead, in the deep eyes of Catherine flared the fire of a mother ready to sacrifice herself to declare war. Together, in a moment of silence but profound understanding, they came to an ironclad decision. There would be no more concessions or compromises. It was time for the Prince of Wales to personally remove his mask of moderation, clean up the toxic trash trying to take root in his family, and Camilla would have to pay a heavy price for her absurd arrogance. But the awakening at Windsor was only the tip of the iceberg. The wrath of the Prince of Wales needed a final spark to explode, and that spark was lit by Queen Camilla herself at the dinner table at Highgrove. Darkness fell and enveloped the Highgrove estate, bringing a suffocating, oppressive silence instead of the inherent peace of the English countryside. Inside the regal dining room, where royal candles cast a pale yellow light on pure silver tableware and expensive crystal glasses, a family dinner was taking place in a chilling silence. It was not the silence of a warm family enjoying a moment together, but the deadly quiet before a massive storm. The air thickened with vicious calculations and nauseating hypocrisy radiating from the head of the table where Queen Camilla reigned. The scheming woman, the one who had spent half her life maneuvering, trampling on the happiness of others to climb to the seat of power, now wore a dignified, condescending, and utterly smug face. Opposite the forced, pale, and cowardly smile of King Charles was the cold, silent presence radiating a blazing, murderous intent of Prince William. He sat there, like a volcano being tightly compressed to its final limit, his eyes sharp as razors, just waiting for a spark to burn down all the lies present in this room. And that spark arrived, originating from the most innocent and pure moment. Amidst the atmosphere as tense as a string, little Princess Charlotte, the precious jewel carrying the innate aura and magical beauty of her grandmother, the late Princess Diana, spoke up. Ignoring the brutal psychological trauma that the evil step-grandmother had sown into her mind at Windsor not long ago, the little girl still maintained the purity of a child. Charlotte turned to look at her grandfather, her big, round, sparkling eyes overflowing with expectation, using her sweet voice to ask King Charles for permission to play a piece of music on the grand piano placed in the corner of the room. It was just a tiny request, an innocent effort to dispel the suffocation of the party, an adorable act that any grandfather in the world would smile and nod to in immense pride. However, before King Charles could open his mouth to coax his little granddaughter, a piercing, cold voice, soaked in venom, rang out, cutting through the atmosphere. Camilla, not missing any despicable opportunity to trample on the self-esteem of the Wales family, threw a disdainful, sharp look at Charlotte. With the condescending, superior tone of someone with dark intentions, she hissed every word, deliberately speaking loudly to humiliate the little girl in front of everyone present. "Charlotte, sit still like a true lady. This is not a stage to show off loud and mannerless childish tricks." Every word uttered from the mouth of that cunning woman was like poisoned needles, aimed directly at the tender heart of a 9-year-old child. She was gloating. She wanted to use her empty power to crush the confidence of Charlotte, to prove that in this dynasty she was the one who held the power of life and death, the one who could arbitrarily insult the true royal bloodline without anyone daring to say a word. But Camilla had made a fatal mistake. The most foolish and arrogant mistake in her life of clinging to royal power. She forgot that sitting right next to Charlotte was not a cowardly and resigned prince, but a great father, a lead lion ready to tear apart anyone who dared to touch his child. Smash! A dry, harsh, and violent sound rang out, tearing through the regal space of the Highgrove dining room. It was not a gunshot, but its destructive force carried the power of a terrifying earthquake. Prince William, without a word of warning, slammed a solid Czech crystal wine glass onto the oak table. The impact was so strong that the deep red wine splashed across the pristine white tablecloth like bloodstains, and the base of the glass shattered, making a chilling cracking sound. The entire room seemed to freeze instantly. The servers stood petrified in the corners, not daring to breathe heavily. The already suffocating atmosphere was now crushed by a terrifyingly heavy and oppressive pressure radiating from the most powerful man in the room. William slowly stood up. The regal aura, blending with the primal wrath of a father, turned him into an unstoppable god of war. His long shadow cast over the entire dining table, completely overshadowing the small, pathetic presence of Camilla. Ignoring all stereotypical etiquette and norms, ignoring the existence of the trembling king sitting in the head chair, William directed his eyes burning with resentment, cold as a 1,000-year-old iceberg, straight at the wicked woman sitting opposite him. With a deep, hoarse voice, Emphasizing each word as sharply as thousands of razor blades cutting into flesh, he dropped every word into the silent space, ironclad and uncompromising. The only person who needs to learn how to behave properly here is not Charlotte. The whole room went dead silent. The short sentence carried absolute destructive power. It was not just a warning, but a fatal slap right into the hypocritical mask of Camilla, stripping bare her uneducated, despicable nature and the essence of a third party that could never be washed away. The heavily powdered face of Camilla instantly turned pale, white as a corpse. Her lips trembled violently, stammering speechlessly, her eyes flashing with extreme terror upon realizing she had just accidentally angered a true beast. She shriveled up, shrinking back in her chair, trying to cling to a pleading look towards King Charles. But on the other side of the table, King Charles was a picture of pathetic helplessness. The monarch wearing the most powerful crown in England was now awkward, confused, and cowardly, not daring to utter even a single word of defense for his scheming wife. He buried his face in his plate of food, completely crushed by the overwhelming, sky-high authority of his eldest son. In that historically shocking moment at the Highgrove dining table, the power order was completely overthrown. No king or queen existed, leaving only the majestic future king, proudly rising to smash all dark forces, to protect his own flesh and blood at any cost. After the terrifying earthquake in the Highgrove dining room, the dawn of the next day awoke, bringing a completely different atmosphere. An argument at the dining table could easily fade into oblivion under the glamorous cover of fake diplomatic smiles, but Prince William had never been a superficial or impulsive person. He carried in him the blood of conquering kings and the sharp wisdom of a leader forged to rule an entire kingdom. William understood better than anyone that to deal with a cunning, manipulative person who was used to spending her whole life climbing with dirty tricks like Camilla, verbal violence or impulsive fits of anger were not enough. That woman lived on manipulation, clinging to petty privileges and extending her octopus tentacles through close contact. Therefore, to completely sever that venom from his daughter, the Prince of Wales coldly activated a silent but devastatingly destructive punishing machine, a silent martial law through the art of proximity management. This was not an empty media buzzword, but an ultimate political power lever deeply imbued with the British royal style. In the world of royalty, where everything is operated by dense schedules and the sophisticated arrangements of dozens of secretaries, who gets to stand next to whom and who gets to appear with whom is the absolute measure of power. William used the massive administrative machinery of Kensington Palace itself as a sharp sword to draw a life and death boundary, an inviolable protective circle around little Princess Charlotte. With cold, decisive orders that needed no explanation, William turned that soft power into a fatal punishment, striking right into the controlling ambition of the wicked stepmother. The statistics afterwards were truly a massive shock, a death sentence without black ink on white paper for the power of Queen Camilla within the family. Within just 48 hours from the moment the crystal glass shattered at Highgrove, a fierce schedule sweep took place. 100% of the events, afternoon tea parties, internal visits, or any joint schedule featuring the presence of Charlotte alongside Camilla, lacking the direct supervision of William or Catherine, were mercilessly crossed out. All previous plans, even those scheduled for months, were coldly stamped, cancelled by the office of the Prince of Wales, with a single, perfect, and highly diplomatic reason: scheduling conflict. The delicate cruelty of the British royal family lies in the fact that it never leaves a trace. No prohibitive document was issued, no public embargo was announced on the news, and of course, absolutely no more loud arguments broke out. Everything went smoothly, chillingly silent but carrying terrifying destructive power. When the aides of Camilla called Kensington to arrange a meeting, they only received refusals so polite they sent shivers down the spine, Unfortunately, Princess Charlotte is busy with her horseback riding lesson. Princess Catherine has arranged a private trip for the little girl, or the schedule of the prince does not allow it. Just like that, the door leading to the world of Charlotte slammed shut, locked tight by administrative padlocks that even the Queen of England could never break. Camilla, the woman who was always smug about her peak position, gradually felt a suffocating isolation. She sat in the luxurious living room at Clarence House, facing schedule books empty of the names of the future generation, and bitterly realized she had been completely stripped of all opportunities to approach her step-granddaughter. This was exactly how William established martial law. He did not forbid Camilla from entering the same building, but he ensured that she would forever, never be able to share a room with Charlotte without his knife, like cold gaze piercing her. William had turned Camilla, from a self-proclaimed powerful queen, into a redundant entity, an invisible ghost with absolutely no influence within the connection circle of the future generation of the dynasty. This punishment was more painful than any insult. It struck right at the attention-craving nature and the desire to assert power of Camilla. Being completely cut off from Princess Charlotte, the brightest jewel and the media center of the royal family, meant that Camilla was stripped of a precious tool to paint the image of a kind grandmother that she always tried hard to fake before the American public and the whole world. The sinister third party, who used dirty tricks to seize the crown, now had to tremble and realize a cruel truth. The throne of King Charles might shield her in the present, but the future of the United Kingdom belongs to William, Catherine, and their children. And in that highly secured future, the door had permanently slammed shut in front of Camilla. She was locked outside, helplessly watching the prosperous future dynasty without a single foothold, turned into a historical stain, being gradually purged from the family tree by the true heirs themselves through the sharpest silence. Deprived of control, Queen Camilla seemingly had not yet accepted the new boundary. And her final overstepping effort at the Balmoral vacation stumbled upon a massive boulder named William. Balmoral Castle, lying quietly amidst the wild and majestic Scottish Highlands, has for centuries always been considered the safest sanctuary of the British royal family. Unlike the suffocation of Windsor or the rigid rules at Buckingham Palace, Balmoral is where royal members shed their heavy title cloaks to enjoy sunny summer days, hunting trips on the moor, and dinners away from the prying eyes of the press. Here, the defensive boundaries are often lowered to the minimum, because they believe that within these ancient stone walls, only family affection and peace exist. But they were wrong. That loss of vigilance accidentally created a perfect loophole for the venomous snake named Camilla to slither past the invisible security barrier that Prince William had painstakingly established. For someone who had spent her whole life stalking, bowing, and backstabbing like her, the relaxation at Balmoral was a golden opportunity to launch a final cowardly attack, aiming to snatch back a bit of cheap authority that was slowly dying. On a quiet late summer afternoon, when most of the family was participating in an outdoor horseback riding session, little Princess Charlotte chose to stay in the sunroom of the castle. The room was flooded with natural light, warm and peaceful, completely contrasting with the dark clouds gathering from the hallway outside. Charlotte, the priceless diamond carrying the purest royal bloodline, was engrossed in a drawing book, completely unaware of the darkness crashing down from behind. The glass door slightly opened. Camilla, the brazen woman who had stolen the happiness of the late Princess Diana, stepped in like a ghost, bringing a gloomy and toxic aura. Realizing this was a rare moment the little girl was not protected by her parents, she immediately seized the opportunity to strike a psychological blow to crush the spirit of the child. With the creeping but calculating footsteps of a cowardly predator, Camilla approached the corner of the room where Charlotte was sitting. She deliberately blocked the only light source, casting her dark and grotesque shadow over the little girl. With a hissing, sinister voice, thick with the jealousy of someone whose background was a lowly mistress, Camilla began to pour out cruel words of discipline. She used the authority of a fake queen to oppress, threaten, and force Charlotte to submit, to understand who in this family was the one holding the power of decision. Camilla wanted to see fear in those innocent eyes, wanted to suffocate the proud aura that Charlotte inherited from Diana, the aura that she could pile thousands of tons of royal jewelry on her body and still never possess. The relentless, cruel, and mentally overwhelming attack of a woman in her 70s aimed at a 9-year-old girl in a closed room was the absolute depth of cowardice, an unforgivable psychological crime. But right at the moment Camilla was gloating, thinking she had crushed the weak resistance of Charlotte, the door of the sunroom suddenly burst wide open. Not with a gentle push, but with an impact force so strong that the oak hinges had to vibrate violently. William appeared. The atmosphere in the room immediately froze. Leaving behind his usual calm demeanor, the Prince of Wales stepped into the room with the majesty of a roaring god of war, bringing a cold fury that could burn everything. Without taking a single second to assess the situation, William took long, decisive, and powerful strides, heading straight toward his daughter. His tall, solid figure, like a towering mountain of rock, immediately cut off the line of sight and the space between the old witch and the little princess. He reached his arm behind, pulling Charlotte close to him, completely shielding his little flesh and blood behind his broad back. In that moment, the shadow of William completely swallowed the pathetic existence of Camilla, reverting her to her true form as a mediocre, despicable, and worthless woman. Camilla flinched, her heavily powdered face shrinking in panic. Trying to salvage a bit of torn dignity, she clumsily opened her mouth, intending to force a fake smile and pour out her familiar cover-up words. "Oh, William, I was just talking with—" "Enough?" The voice of William rang out, deep, resonant, and carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds of a death sentence, slashing through all the cowardly justification efforts of Camilla. There was no room for argument. There was no room for diplomatic hypocrisy. The eyes of the future king shot out gazes as sharp as thousands of ice-cold swords, pinning down the cunning woman. With an attitude of extreme contempt, as if looking at the dirtiest trash at the bottom of society, William pointed his finger straight at the face of Camilla and emphasized every single word, ironclad, coldly, absolutely not allowing any resistance. "Never let me see you alone with my daughter ever again, even for a single second." That command was not just a threat, it was the most cruel and absolute deprivation. In front of a child, William blatantly delivered a devastating slap to the vanity of Camilla, stripping away the fake crown on her head, trampling her empty power down into the black mud. He proved to Charlotte that the woman standing there trembling, her face turning pale, was nothing but a cowardly puppet, without any status or authority, allowed to hurt the true members of the dynasty. The defeat of Camilla was completely humiliating. No one protected her. No words could save the situation. She could only bite her lip until it bled, bow her head, and trudge out of the room like a sewer rat dragged into the light, carrying the humiliating shame that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The power of the third party at Balmoral, and in the entire living space of the Wales family, was permanently extinguished. After the storm of wrath in the Balmoral sunroom temporarily subsided, permanently extinguishing the arrogant insolence of the cunning woman, its aftershocks immediately spread straight to the most discreet and powerful office of King Charles. A secret, closed-door meeting of historical nature that determined the fate of the whole dynasty took place between the two men carrying the destiny of the great monarchy on their shoulders. But this was absolutely not an ordinary royal audience between the reigning monarch and the heir, but a fierce negotiation, marking a turning point of implicit power transition inside the cold stone walls. The regal space was suffocatingly quiet. All sounds seemed to be muffled, leaving only the ticking of the antique clock knocking out tense rhythms. King Charles, the monarch wearing the prestigious crown cast in solid gold, but deep inside exposing a weak, accommodating, and cowardly ego, was sitting slumped on the leather armchair. Under the sky-high pressure of his eldest son, he seemed to age 10 years, his eyes dodging, clearly revealing his helplessness and cowardice when having to face the unprecedented fury of William. With a pleading, weak voice tinged with the cheap compromise that had become his nature, Charles tried to evoke compassion from his son. The old king begged for a space to heal, longing for peaceful relations, hoping to preserve a fragile bit of dignity for the royal family in front of the public. And deeper, worse, that plea was a pathetic effort to cover up and protect the torn dignity of the shameless wife bearing the title of queen. King Charles, as always throughout his life, still deluded himself with the illusion that deep conflicts, the fatal psychological wounds caused by viciousness, could be easily hidden under the glamorous red velvet carpet of the palace, as long as everyone endured and played the role of a warm family in front of the whole world. However, standing tall in front of the weak king, who always compromised with evil, was no longer an obedient young man, swallowing bitterness and enduring like many years ago. Now it was a true lead lion, a father carrying primal strength, spreading his arms to protect his bloodline. Prince William blatantly rejected all cowardly excuses, categorically, ruthlessly, and firmly refusing that unreasonable, toxic indulgence. The resolve of the Prince of Wales at this moment was as sharp as a royal sword just unsheathed, unyieldingly slashing all sentimental ties, permanently cutting off the mess of lies that his father was trying to hold on to. With the imposing, ruthless demeanor of a future king, William delivered an ultimatum that smashed all the naive illusions of Charles. His deep, ice-cold eyes pierced into the pathetic awkwardness of the person opposite him. Every word uttered carried immense weight, reshaping the entire order of the British monarchy. The crown on your head belongs to you, the right to rule the subjects belongs to you, but the absolute safety and dignity of this family are forever decided by me. William emphasized, with a ruthlessness bordering on cruelty, a declaration echoing throughout the palace that the life, happiness, and spirit of little Princess Charlotte, the pure bloodline carrying the great legacy of Diana, stand 10,000 times higher than all the fake faces of Buckingham Palace. No frivolous title, no deceitful media campaign, and certainly no venomous, scheming woman with dirty tricks is allowed to come close, trampling on the little girl for even another moment. The sky-high majesty of the heir completely overshadowed the power of the current throne. King Charles, facing the solid fortress, steeped in the murderous intent to protect the family of his son, completely collapsed. That king had to bite his teeth and step back, silently accepting the ultimate bitter truth that the royal power might be in his hands, but the future of the royal family had completely slipped out of his control, lying entirely in the iron palm of the Prince of Wales. The result of that shocking ultimatum, which shook the royal foundation, did not need to be declared in black and white ink, but it was exposed in the most cruel, bare, and gloating way through the media lens during the traditional church service right after. For body language experts, millions of eyes of the American public and the world, the photos spread on the newspapers were not just harmless royal moments. It was a wordless indictment, a public punishment that completely ended the deceitful authority of Queen Camilla. The scene clearly showed a deep division, an inviolable boundary that could not be reversed. King Charles walked silently ahead with a tired posture, while Camilla trailed behind, completely isolated in a cold, lost space. The physical distance between the Wales family and that evil queen was intentionally stretched out, meticulously measured, creating an insurmountable abyss of power. Camilla, the one who once arrogantly had illusions about the power of the stolen crown, now looked pathetic, shriveled, forcing a fake smile and lonely like an outcast right in the center of the royal family. Her true face was exposed, stripped of all opportunities to continue acting out the play of a kind, forgiving grandmother in front of the camera lenses. In stark contrast to that tragic wretchedness, the Wales family emerged like a brilliant and impenetrable fortress, shining with the power of true family affection. The absolute focal point of that regal picture was the firm, authoritative, and boundlessly loving hand of Prince William placed on the tiny shoulder of Charlotte. That hand was not simply the protection of a great father, but a firm message of defiance sent to any dark force that dared to approach his precious jewel. Under that absolute, safe protection, little Princess Charlotte walked with her head held high, radiant in the sunlight. The confident, bright, mischievous, and proud smile returned to her angelic face, permanently erasing the haunting tears of self-pity at Windsor. That was a brilliant high note, marking the comprehensive, humiliating, and shameful defeat of all psychological abuse and cowardly manipulation efforts that Camilla had ever intended to sow. The light of truth crushed the cunning darkness, and the true bloodline of the dynasty completely kicked the dirty presence of the lowly third party out of the lives of the future generation. The storm behind the closed oak doors finally left a permanent result, smashing all cowardly manipulative ambitions. Queen Camilla might still try to cling to the sparkling crown on her head, still wear the condescending regal cloak, and stride in solemn ceremonies full of dignity. However, behind that glamorous shell and lifeless fake smile, she permanently lost the ticket to step into the future of the dynasty. That woman full of dirty tricks was completely stripped of all privileges to interfere in the lives of the Wales children. The absolute, cold silence radiating from Kensington Palace against all nosy media speculation was absolutely not a retreat or a compromise. It was the most authoritative, firm, and murderous roar of Prince William. With the primal, fiery love of a father and the steely bravery of a great future king, he proved an unshakable truth. The royal institution may demand harsh personal sacrifices, but absolutely no dark force is allowed to trample on the pure soul of a child. Thanks to that solid fortress wall, Princess Charlotte proudly regained her radiant light and angelic smile. The little girl shined not because of the unrealistic change of a system already full of corruption, but entirely because of the unconditional, fierce, and ruthless protection of her father against the venom of the cunning third party. William personally smashed the cowardly mold of resignation and endurance that had suffocated this family for many generations. He sent a resounding message to the entire kingdom and the whole world. The height of the crown is never measured by blind endurance, but it is measured by the proud bravery to stand up and protect the most vulnerable. Thank you for taking the time to follow this shocking and emotional secret inner court story. What do you think about the fierce action of Prince William to protect his daughter? Do not forget to leave your opinions in the comments section below. Press like, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the latest secret inner court information from us. Goodbye, and see you again in the next videos.